All right. I'm going to share my screen so that we can go through the PowerPoint presentation that we have. And can someone confirm that you can see my screen?
I can see it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, so very briefly, as everybody I'm sure knows, the Alcohol, Drug Addiction, and Mental Health Services Board for Montgomery County is responsible for the planning, funding, and monitoring of public mental health and addiction treatment services for individuals and families in Montgomery County. And under law, we are one of the 50 boards coordinating the public behavioral health and addiction treatment and recovery systems in Ohio. It is our mission to have the innovative work of Montgomery County ADAMHS to support accessible, equitable behavioral health care and supportive resources for people in need to alleviate individual and community well-being. And our vision is to envision an inclusive community that promotes mental well-being so everyone has the opportunity to live a life of fulfillment. And I think that as we discuss SOS 4.0, you will see how clearly our vision, our mission aligns with the priorities that Ohio MOS has set forth as well. So the State Opioid and Stimulus Response Grant 4.0. I want to talk a little bit about the background of this. As I'm sure everyone knows, there have been versions of State Opioid Response Grant, also known as SOR, ranging from the initial to 2.0 to a no-cost extension. Same for the State Opioid Stimulus Response Grant. There were varying versions of it, including our most current, which is 3.2 and 3.0. What Ohio MOS is doing is they are issuing SOS 4.0 as an umbrella request. So every other version and every other priority that has been previously set forth will come under an umbrella request. Also new for SOS 4.0 is this is a competitive bidding process. What that means for us is that we, along with any other ADAMHS or Mental Health Recovery Services Board and any other nonprofit community organization, we are all in competition for this award. There is no guaranteed amount, nor is there a guaranteed award. So this is a full application process for which we will be competing with other agencies across the state to receive these funds. The purpose of SOS 4.0 is to help provide resources to increase access to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration approved medications for the treatment of opioid use disorder, otherwise known as MOUD. This grant also supports the continuum of prevention, harm reduction, treatment, and recovery supports for services related to opioid use disorder, stimulant misuse and use disorders, and other concurrent substance use disorders. These are the purposes that are outlined by Ohio MOS. The responsibility of the providers. There is a very strong emphasis on the provision of evidence-based, culturally adapted, and community-defined evidence practices in the care continuum of prevention, harm reduction, treatment, and recovery supports, specifically aimed to address the opioid use disorder, stimulant use disorder, and concurrent substance use disorders. As we move into talking about the population of focus, these populations of focus were identified by Ohio MOS after a series of community and regional work group meetings that they had through the spring of this year prior to their application with SAMHSA. And SAMHSA's direction is really their directive and their population of focus is to include transitional aged youth, young adults, 16 to 25, adults, families, communities impacted by opioid use disorder, stimulant use disorder, and concurrent behavioral health outcomes. And so how Ohio MOS is applying this directive is they have indicated investment priorities, and their investment priorities are evidence-based, culturally adapted, community-defined evidence practices that will help foster social connectedness, help recovery capital, and lasting wellness so that every Ohioan can reach their full potential. Ohio's population of focus are in general, populations that experience high rates of opioid use disorder, stimulant use disorder, and overdose deaths. And their specific priority population are racial and ethnic minorities, pregnant women, youth and young adults, veterans and active service members, rural and Appalachian Ohio's, immigrants and non-English speakers, and members of the LGBTQIA+ community and intersections of these identities. Ohio MOS has really focused on 4 service areas. Those service areas include treatment, which includes all FDA MOUDs to be employed in treatment programs, low barrier settings, criminal justice settings, and in addition to other evidence-based practices. They're also focusing on community and family resiliency, which is really looking at evidence-based prevention to reach children. And as we discuss this further, we will identify these specific evidence-based practices that they are looking at. Also practices focused on transitional aged youth, young adults, older adults, families, and special populations. They are also focusing on 3 areas of recovery supports. First and foremost is recovery housing. They are also looking at peer support and also supported employments. And finally, they are also looking at harm reduction methods. So that would include medication safety, such as secured locked bags or bottles for medications, naloxone boxes, and other FDA-approved overdose reversal medications. So specifically now I want to talk about the 5 content areas. And as I'm doing this, I want the providers on this call to be thinking about if you have been involved in SOS versions in the past, where your programming falls into these content areas. Content area number 1 is evidence-based treatment and harm reduction. And this content area is truly focused on increasing access to all forms of medications for opioid use disorders. This would include the provision of MOUDs in specialty populations that might not traditionally have access to the provisions of these medications. It may also include programming to increase access to MOUDs for providers, such as residency programs that may help expand the workforce. And this would also, under this content area, this would also increase access to treatment for pregnant women and postpartum women as well. Content area number 2 involves community and family resiliency and is focused around prevention. And through this content area, Ohio MOS is really looking at expansion of evidence-based practices and prevention, harm reduction, education, school-based programming, and strategic messaging to school-aged youth, young adults, families, and special populations. And with this, Ohio MOS has identified very specific evidence-based programs that they are looking to include in this content area. Specifically, they are looking at the PACS Good Behavior Game. They are looking at the WISE and PEARLS program that focuses on providing support and wellness options to the older adult population. They are also looking at the CLCF curriculum, which is the Creating Lasting Families Connections curriculum. These are the evidence-based programs that they have identified as priority evidence-based programs for inclusion into SOS 4.0. They have also indicated SBIRT as being a priority evidence-based program also. Also included within this priority content area is to increase family peer navigators. in order to provide some additional support, peer support for family members. In looking at content area number 3, that of recovery supports, this area specifically focuses around recovery housing. And one indication that they have set as mandatory within 4.0 is that any recovery housing applicant must support and or provide participant access to evidence-based treatment, including all forms of FDA-approved MOUDs as required by SAMHSA. So if a recovery housing provider has an exclusionary criteria of individuals participating in any form of MOUD, you would not be able to apply for this round of funding, as that is a requirement by SAMHSA and Ohio MOS. In addition, there may also be opportunities for transitional and permanent housing supports, as that is another priority area within the recovery housing content area. This may also include things such as deposits and or first month's rent for individuals that are transitioning out of recovery homes into permanent housing. We also have identified that Ohio MOS is allowing things such as utility deposits and some utility coverage. And finally, within this priority and content area, there is also the expansion for homeless outreach. So programs that reach out to individuals experiencing homelessness would also apply for funding through this content area. Content area number 4 is recovery supports that focus around peer support and other services. This content area is looking to enhance these peer supports. And so as we are looking at applying for these program content areas, we would be looking at providers that have opportunities to also expand their peer support services beyond what they may already be doing. This content area will also support some comprehensive case management, wellness programs, and will also increase access to harm reduction activities. We were excited to see that the addition of vending machines is now an allowable expense and a priority within this content area. And so we are also looking at options to include that within this request. And finally, the 5th content area is that of recovery supports and specifically supported employment. It's important to note that supported employment will involve both financial literacy counseling, things such as helping identify workforce development opportunities, job opportunities for individuals who are in recovery. I will also tell you as we move further into this, that there is a very strong focus, stronger than what we have seen in 3.0 and 3.2, related to the Government Performance Results Act, also fondly known as the GPRA. Those GPRAs are going to be requirements in just about every single one of these content areas. We may or may not be able to receive some exceptions from Ohio MOS as we move into this. But if you apply for this funding, you need to know that you will likely be required to complete the GPRA. And if it is not something that you feel that your program can do, we would ask that you do not apply for that funding, because there is no guarantee that the GPRAs will not need to be administered. As far as the award details, like I said, this is not an automatic award. This is a competitive process. And the timeline for this project period is September 30th of this year through September 29th of 2025. We have been given indication that approximately 7 to 14 business days after our submission, which is September 23rd, that the state will provide notification regarding the award, whether we receive it and or how much we receive. So the actual dollar amounts for the awarded applications are truly going to be based on the number of applicants as well as the overall amount of requests that have been made. It is important to note that Ohio Moss has indicated that this is a one-time project. There has been no discussion of any further funding for SOS. So the projects that are awarded under this funding opportunity will be viewed as one-time only. And so it's important for me to notify all applicants that continuation of funding beyond this period should not be assumed and is not guaranteed. One requirement that will be necessary is a sustainability plan from every program, because it is important to us and to Ohio Moss that we are not just funding these programs and projects on a one-time only basis, but that every provider has a plan for sustainability beyond this funding. As far as prioritizing, applicants should prioritize projects that are one-time in nature, such as startup costs, one-time purchases of equipment. For projects that will be ongoing beyond this year, prioritizing long-term funding sources as well. So our application package, which we will submit to Ohio Moss, is about a 10-page project. It is the most detailed version of SOS that we have encountered to date. And so as part of that, these 4 items here are large sections that we will need assistance in completing. And so as you prepare your required materials, this is what we will need from you. We will need the traditional budget expenditure sheet, which you are all familiar with, but we will go through that. In addition to the budget expenditure sheet, most of you are familiar with writing a short narrative to describe what your services will be. You will include that narrative in a separate column to the right of the budget expenditure sheet. We will also require a separate document indicating what your sustainability plan is, and a separate document indicating your fidelity monitoring plan, all of which we will go over here. All of these materials are due to us by September 6th at 12 p.m. We understand that this is a short turnaround time. We understand that there is a holiday on Monday. We received this information ourselves Monday morning and met internally to identify steps moving forward and quickly scheduled this meeting so that we could offer you guys as much time as possible to complete this information. We would ask that you send all materials to both myself and to Nadia, and our emails are listed below, and we will ensure that you have this PowerPoint as well. All right, I want to move over to talking a little bit about the budget expenditure sheet. And I thought that it might be helpful to give an example to you guys as to how this should be completed, because oftentimes what causes many of these delays after an overall budget has been awarded to us is that we have to go back and ask for individual changes and corrections to the budget expenditure sheet. So I thought if I maybe broke it down, it would help us to hopefully have what is required by Ohio Moss completed at the onset of it, which the fewer changes that we have to make also supports a more robust package from us. So in looking at the implementing agency, that will already be completed for you, and we will resend out the budget sheet. The implementing agency is the Adamus Board for Montgomery County. The grant program area. You as a provider will indicate which program area you are applying for, and you will use those 5 content areas. So for example, if you are applying for content area number 1, which is treatment, and you are Wright State University or NAFCare providing an MOUD, you would apply for treatment and you would indicate your agency name. If you are applying for community and family resiliency, if you are a prevention program, you would indicate that content area in your name. Same for recovery supports or recovery housing. Please indicate that content area in your name. The budget period will be pre-filled for you. It is September 30th, 2024 through September 29th, 2025. The state grant number, please leave that area blank. We have not received a state grant number as of yet. That is not assigned to us until after we receive our award notification. Okay, moving into some of the content areas. Under the personnel section, this is where you will need to identify the FTE for each staff. These should be FTEs related to the provision of the direct care and service, and it needs to be associated with the identified population. And so the example I give is this. If a peer support position also supports individuals with a primary mental health diagnosis, this position should only account for the time that is dedicated to working with someone who has a substance use disorder. So for example, if you have a full-time peer support specialist who works with 50 individuals, and of those 50 individuals, only 25 of them have a substance use disorder, then that would be a 0.5 FTE. Where this becomes important is that the number of individuals that you are accounting for, that you are serving, will be the number of expected GIPRAs that we will see from your agency. And so if you say you serve 50 individuals, but only 25 of them actually have a substance use diagnosis, then only those 25 are going to be eligible to complete the GIPRAs. So we need to make sure that we are aligning the number of people we are serving with the accurate percent of FTEs. Under the fringe benefit category, and this is typically where we struggle the most and where I think myself over the past year have learned the most about these budget forms. Ohio MOS will require us to list the percent of fringe benefits that are applied to the personnel costs. So if your company's fringe benefits are 25% of their personnel costs, you will need to list that. You will also need to list the associated fringe benefit breakdown. So for example, if your fringe benefits are medical, dental, 401k, you will need to list those fringe benefits in this area.
Jen?
Yes.
We have a couple of questions in the chat that I think might be helpful now rather than later.
Okay, that's fine,
The
Nadia.
question is, what if we're planning to submit for 2 content areas? Should we submit one budget or multiple?
You will submit multiple budgets because we will be aligning these budgets with the content areas.
There's one other question, but I'll save it for later. I think you can go on with this section.
Okay. And one thing I will say that I'm not sure if I clarified earlier on is because this is assuming every other aspect of an SOS or SOR grant, it's considered umbrella, meaning we could apply for one content area or we can apply for multiple content areas. So we will plan to apply for all of the content areas, which is what it makes it an umbrella. Other agencies who may choose to apply separately may only choose to apply for one content area, which is allowable as well. But since we are applying for multiple content areas, we will plan to organize our submission, which would include narratives and budgets according to the varying content areas that Ohio Moss has identified. And Nadia, thank you for stopping me for questions because I can't see my page at all right now. So, okay, moving on to the next section of the budget. The mileage section. The mileage section always tends to get us a little bit as well because oftentimes agencies have higher mileage reimbursement rates than what is allowable through Ohio Moss. And so oftentimes we submit this and then we receive feedback that the budget has to be revised because Ohio Moss, as of federal fiscal year 23-24, was only approving 58 cents per mile. We do not have any indication that that has changed. And so as you are budgeting mileage, I would ask that you do it at 58 cents a mile, and you will need to include the anticipated number of miles. As we look through the rest of the budget, these allowables or not allowables are based on what we last knew was allowable through version 3.2. We have not received any changes in those allowables. So as you prepare your budgets, we are basing it on this past set of allowables. Airfare, lodging, and meals per diem per day are not allowable expenses for your budget. Under the equipment category, computers and equipment can be purchased in terms of the relationship of the purchase to the planned activity. For example, if you needed to purchase a tablet in order to help individuals complete the GIPRA assessment or to engage them in other types of activities, if you can relate that purchase back to the planned activity, that would be allowable. Equipment costs should be less than $5,000. Furniture. You must also justify that in terms of the relationship of the purchase to the planned activity. So for example, if you needed furniture for an office and you can relate it back to a planned activity such as a family peer support group or other such type of activity, that would be allowable. Any printing and copying costs, business cards, things like that would be allowable. Subscriptions or publications, if there were appropriate subscriptions or publications to journals or other things of such, those would be allowable expenses. Personal service contracts. This is the section for recovery housing providers where your budgets and your bed information would go. This is that content area. Honorariums are not allowed. Construction not to exceed $1,000 is allowed, but it would need to apply directly to the provision of services. So if you proposed $1,000 or less in a cost for construction, you would need to justify how it applies to the provision of the service. All right, conferences and trainings. Costs to attend a conference are not allowed. Costs to attend a training are. So if you are putting in these costs, please indicate that they are a training and not a conference. So if your peer support specialists need to attend a training to continue their certification, it would be a training and not a conference. I'm not certain, other than the language, what the differences are, but this is from Ohio Moss's allowables and non-allowables. Registration for said training is allowable. However, going back up to the other content areas, other than mileage to the trainings, there is no allowable costs for airfare, overnight lodging, or meals. So even if it is a 2-day training, the grant would not pay for overnight lodging, nor would it pay for breakfast on the way or dinner on the way home if it's a training that, would require some distance of travel. So please keep that in mind. The purchase of food in general is not allowable. So if you are a program that might host support groups and you want to purchase food or drinks or snacks for those support groups, that is not an allowable expense through this grant. Related to indirect costs, your total indirect costs may be up to 10% of your direct costs. In looking at the categories for indirect costs, rent and lease is allowable. Fleet is allowable as the fleet would apply to the services that you are providing. So for example, if you are providing any kind of transportation for individuals to or from treatment appointments or support groups, things like that, then indirect costs associated with the fleet would be allowable. Same for maintenance and repair. Your costs of insurance for your programs would be allowable. And then any cell phone or office phone for project staff is allowable. Those entire categories are allowable up to 10% of your direct costs. So if your direct costs are $100,000, your indirect costs could be up to $10,000. Project narrative. Each application should contain a short project narrative. We would ask that you simply put it on your budget expenditure page because that will allow Ohio MAS to see each and every one of your project narratives. We will submit an overall project narrative, but the allowance of what we are able to provide as far as the number of words could not even begin to include each and every one of your projects. So we ask that you provide a project narrative no more than 250 words, but should include information on the service and program provided, your target population to be served, any evidence-based curricula or practice to be implemented, and the number of individuals to be served. And I want to underscore again the number of individuals to be served. If your program and project indicates that you will serve 50 individuals, then we will be looking to monitor that 50 individuals are receiving the GIPRA surveys. Sustainability plan. The sustainability plan refers to your organizational capacity to continue, maintain, and enhance the programming, project goals, and objectives to reach the population of focus and to achieve the outcomes. Applicants are being asked to address the elements of the sustainability that you plan to implement throughout the project period to ensure programming can continue beyond year one. If you are not able to provide a sustainability plan, then we would encourage you not to apply for this funding because we would not expect Ohio MAS to fund programs that are not able to be sustained without SOS funding beyond year one. And so we want to make this a strong application. Elements and activities of the sustainability plan may include building ownership with stakeholders, establishing community partnerships, securing alternative funding, and applying for future grant opportunities. We will take and review everyone's sustainability plan and will create an overall sustainability plan for Montgomery County based on what we see from your sustainability plans. And so we ask you to describe that in detail and to share what your strategy will be to sustain those funded programs if SOS is no longer available after September 29th of 25. We do not need a 3-page sustainability plan. We believe that you can likely write a sustainability plan in 250 to 500 words maximum. We're not requiring nor needing 3 to 4-page sustainability document. The amount of work that we're able to put into that area is limited as well. So it does not need to be a large plan. Moving on to the fidelity monitoring plan. As I previously indicated, SAMHSA and Ohio Moss through SAMHSA have indicated the priorities for evidence-based practices. They are also requiring fidelity monitoring to ensure these practices are according to fidelity and that there is ongoing quality improvement. Again, appropriate practices might include medications for opioid use disorder, peer recovery support, recovery housing, contingency management, motivational interviewing, cognitive behavioral therapy, the PACS Good Behavior Game, creating lasting family connections, wellness initiative for senior education, program to encourage active, rewarding lives, care coordination and comprehensive case management services, screening, brief intervention and referral to treatment, supported employment, quick response teams, and targeted media campaigns. As we think about the fidelity monitoring plan, we are asking you to have your agency identify how you will monitor these evidence-based practices on a quarterly basis and provide updates to the SOS project lead. So all applicants should include information on which evidence-based practice or community-defined practice you will utilize and how you will plan to monitor that fidelity throughout the performance period. We would ask for this fidelity monitoring plan to be about 500 words or less. All right, moving on to the required data collection and reporting. And this is when I say that they are placing a strong emphasis on the GIPRAs, that is not to be taken lightly. All applicants must document their plan for data collection, monitoring, and reporting in each content of their application. As you will notice in the overall RFA that Ohio Moss created, you will notice that within each and every content area, it will indicate the exact performance and data collection requirements. And as you will notice in almost every content area and throughout almost every objective, if these objectives and these programming are involved in working directly, providing a service to an individual, Ohio Moss is expecting the GIPRA to be completed. There are a few exceptions to that related to some prevention activities with youth, but overall the GIPRAs will be required. Again, we have an opportunity likely at a later date after the award notification to be able to have more discussion about other reporting options. But at this point in time, the GIPRA will be the required data collection. The GIPRA will be required at intake. So again, if you say that you are serving 25 individuals, we would expect to see 100% compliance with the GIPRAs at the time of intake. At minimum, there would be an 80% follow-up rate at 6 months. And also we would expect to see that 80% follow-up rate at discharge as well. Currently, Ohio Moss sends out biweekly GIPRA reporting, and many of your organizations are familiar with me sending you these reports and asking you to follow up based on lower rates or rates that just don't seem to be in accordance with the services. And we will say that we have found some discrepancies between what you guys have reported and what Ohio Moss has collected. And there have just been some issues that we've had to kind of work out how things are collected or specific language that's been used in order to have all of those credits. But we will be monitoring those reports very closely. Related to prevention and harm reduction activities, there will be program level data that is required through the non-GEPRA reporting tool and the SOAR-TOR program tool on a quarterly basis. We will make sure that all providers have these tools to them so that you are aware of what you need to collect data on at the time of this award. Additionally, all providers will be required to submit the data to us for a mid-year and end-of-year programmatic progress report. And so there may be additional information that we ask. This may be more in a narrative form, because one of the important things is that we want to capture the stories. We want to capture the narratives around what the services are doing and take it from being just a number of people served to showing what these services do to impact people. And so every program will be required to document and share impact stories. This can be a narrative. This can be if you have an individual in a program that you're serving who wants to write a letter or share their story of recovery, if you have an opportunity to create a video or highlight accomplishments of the grant and the individuals receiving these services, we will ask for those types of stories when we have to submit our mid and end of year progress report. Timelines and deadlines. Like I said, we are on a very short time frame. We received this information on Monday, and so today we are having our planning meeting. We are asking that the application package, which includes the budget expenditure page, the project narrative, the sustainability and fidelity monitoring plan, those documents need to be to Nadia and myself by September 6th at 12 p.m. It is important to note that late applications will not be considered for funding. Between September 9th and September 13th, there will be programmatic and budget reviews. We may reach out to your programs and ask for clarification or revisions to the budgets. And then ultimately, we will review and approve these programs for overall inclusion into SOS 4.0. Between September 19th and September 20th, our business office will review the overall budget. And then by September 23rd, Nadia will be responsible for the final submission of our overall grant application by 3 p.m. that day. It is anticipated that we will receive notice of award by the beginning of October. Where to direct questions, we will post the FAQ and PowerPoint as well as the recording of this today. Nadia will post this to our website. Any other questions beyond what we have today can be sent directly to Nadia and myself, and we will try to answer those questions and update the FAQ on our website as well. And so now I do turn it over to all of you if you have any questions. And Nadia, I'm going to let you coordinate that. But one final thing again, please send all of your application packets directly to Nadia and myself, and we will ensure that we receive them all and work through them.
Perfect.
So I'm going
you.
to.
Thank
You
you,
are
Jen.
welcome.
I'm going to go ahead and just work through the chat. So if you have a question, feel free to maybe just put a note in the chat, and then When we get to you, we can have you unmute and ask your question. I am going to start. There's a question from Jessica with Joshua Recovery. And the question is, um, those that we serve would not include those that specify alcohol as their only substance use issue. Is this correct?
The primary population of focus are individuals with opioid and stimulant use disorders. So if a person's primary substance use diagnosis is an alcohol use disorder, they would not be applicable and eligible to receive funding through this grant.
Um, and then we had a question about what is due on September 6th versus what is due on September 23rd. I think we answered that at the end, but if you just want to clarify again.
Sure. September 6th is the application packet that we need from you guys, which includes the budget expenditure worksheet, the narrative, which you will include on the budget expenditure worksheet, the sustainability and the fidelity monitoring plan for your programs and your agencies. That is all we need from you by September 6th. We will compile the rest and we will submit to Ohio Mass by September 23rd.
Perfect, thank you. And then Karen had a note in here that the change from Wright State to Ohio State has made some issues with the GIPRA. And I just wanted to offer Karen the opportunity to maybe talk about those questions so we could uplift those to Ohio Moss if there's need.
Thank you.
Hello. What I was talking about, actually, we have not done the GEPRA through our SOS funds with Adamus because we have a prevention focus there. But in other applications that we've had, it just, I think with the transition from when Wright State was doing it, you could get really quick responses from them regarding, can you send us an update? Can you give us an update of where we are, how we're doing, what our percentages are looking like? And I haven't had the same experience with reaching out with Ohio State yet. So I know, granted, it has been a new start for them to be doing it, but it just doesn't seem to have come so quickly. So that was more just a comment that I had, and I've talked about that. I've made that report when we've done our follow-ups with them. It just hasn't been as quick, but some of the things have been improved though. Some of the reporting, the way when you're dropped, some of the drop downs and things when you're actually in the GEPRA. So it was more just a comment that I think they've been aware of. So that was it.
And yes, I will say that those biweekly reports that we receive are 2 weeks behind in the data that they're sending out. So anything that we receive today there's a 2-week lag in those reports.
Right.
I will say that over the past year, I have seen an increase in the timeliness of their communication to myself and other providers when we have reached out and asked questions.
Right. So, and again, not a criticism, just as much of
Sure.
a kind of a comment that it's just, and I think again, just a new process for them and a new learning system and us learning how to work with them. So thank you though. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you, Karen. Are there any other questions? I'm not seeing any in the chat, so if anyone wants to just unmute if they have any other questions. Okay, I'm not hearing any, so I'll hand it back to Jen, but maybe Jen and I can stay on for a minute or two as people are logging off so that if you had a question but didn't want to ask it in front of the group, we'll be available.
Absolutely. So again, I just thank everybody for being on this call today, for your interest in moving forward with SOS 4.0. It is our intent to submit an application for an umbrella RFA, but please note that you are, as individual agencies, also able to apply for specific content areas if your programming meets those content areas as well. We are excited to organize this on behalf of our community, and we hope to put forth a very competitive request in response to this RFA and are very optimistic. I'm very optimistic that our response will be highly competitive and that we will receive additional funding for our community. So again, thank you, everyone. We look forward to receiving your submissions by next Friday, the 6th. And Nadia and I are happy to stay on here if you have any additional questions. If something comes up over the next couple of days, please feel free to email us as well. Thank you, everyone.
Hey, Jen, real quick before you hang up, this is Bobby. You're going to send out that packet that you went through today. You're going to email that out to us.
Yes, we will.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Jen.